welcome everyone to Anselmo Academy of Music and the Arts online series that I call Music is Life. My name is Vera Anselmo and I'm the founder and artistic director. And as we are celebrating our 20th anniversary this school year, I wanted to do something meaningful and long-lasting. We are presenting a series of workshops, conversations with leading musicians who will tell us their story. I believe in storytelling. I think storytelling is very empowering. Since I was in my teens, I read numerous biographies that helped inspire me, guide me, and challenge me through my journey. And I'm sure I'm not alone. We hope through life stories of today's leading musicians, it will help many aspiring artists to find their voice and their calling. So welcome everyone. Welcome our guests today, Aviva Aranovich, Korine Fujiwara, and Anton Batagov to our very first workshop. And just like I said in my introduction, that I was hoping that you would share moments of your life story, which I think is very, very powerful and inspiring to everyone listening. And with the hopes, obviously, that they will create an impact on so many young musicians. Me and Aviva went to school together. Juilliard. This was late 90s, or early 90s, I think that we met. And being from former Soviet Union, just like myself, I wanted to briefly tell us a little bit your story from childhood through Juilliard, and then after Juilliard, we know that you are a concert performing artist, you are a pianist, recording artist. You have also started a radio show in Germany, etc. So tell us your life story and your path, please.
Well, my life story, I was originally born in Lithuania. At the time it was USSR, but became independent. My mom is a pianist, musician, and I was kind of born under the piano and continued that, and I wanted to play the piano. No violin, nothing. Piano was my mission, and it's from early on, it was a passion, and I just loved that instrument. I mean, I know people hate me for saying it, but I don't think there's anything greater than the piano invented. It's just so powerful. And I think when you have the piano, you sometimes feel like you own the world. Like a friend of mine used to tell me, like, you feel bad, just go practice, just play. Everything's gonna be fine. And it really is. It's so spiritual, so wonderful for me. But so then my family moved to Israel, and I just got accepted to Juilliard, and I went to United States, came to New York, landed out of nowhere. And, it was interesting because I met a lot of people like Vera and like Korine. And, in New York, we had Tower Records. We don't have it anymore, but every day you come out and you buy.
I remember that, yeah.
I came out every day and bought something, and I would go with my Walkman and listen to music on the street, and you feel like it was very different, like going to concerts and being exposed, meeting other people, really, like playing, like remember Emma Takmizian, like playing for each other and meeting composers and performing their music. And now Korine tells me she's composing. And that's, it's priceless, because also Juilliard located in the center of New York. All the exposure we had just from being in that place. And me, I was a foreigner student, so I went to work as an usher because that's all I could do. So I got to see all these concerts for free. And
that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't my work study because that's all I could do. They allowed me to work. And the exposure, I remember, like, I went to a rehearsal of Eva Pogorelic with this teacher, like screaming, that whole thing, I think it just builds you up. Builds you up. And then, of course, the school goes by very fast. Then comes a question, what do you do after school? And I kind of look back, a lot of people who were doing well, they had a mentor or somebody who guided them, because kids really don't know anything. And I think Vera can relate probably to me, because like coming from where we are coming, we totally were clueless about the business. You just play good. That's all it is. You just practice. And then you realize it's not really, it's not, your playing, it has nothing to do with anything, marketing or anything. And, then it becomes a survival. So I met a lot of people, and obviously I was getting as many concerts as I could, like churches everywhere I possibly could. I got students, and I was trying, and working on my papers and traveling and playing. And honestly, it was a really, really like great experience. Like um, makes I think everybody who goes into this, I think to play a lot makes no difference where you are. You're gonna meet a lot of people. And like in one of the concerts, I remember I met this man. He passed, but he was my admirer, and he managed me for a while just because he liked my playing. And there are a lot of people out there who, gonna befriend you and stay friends with you forever, and help you and guide you. And I think that's probably the most important thing to do. You can't. But when you come to a new place and you just, Berlin is a huge, huge center for music. And it was very interesting for me to see, because it's really like thriving, and a lot of arts and a lot of music. It's a little more expensive now. It's a little harder now, but years ago it was really like everybody could go there. And in Germany, music is a profession, and there's a lot. I mean, here's a very silly experience, like that nobody could relate to in New York. I went there, and this friend of mine who runs the Barenboim Music School, she says, play a concert here next week. We have a school here. Why wouldn't you play a concert? And I said to her, well, who's going to come? I don't know anyone. Like, I just got here. Like, give me a little time. She says, oh, no, it's okay. Make a flyer and hang it out in the bars around here. I was like, what? Bars? She says, yes, just do it. People will come. So I took her advice. We went out and we literally posted flyers in bars, like people drinking there. And the place was packed. I mean, this is like a shocker to me that you have this, people go there to drink, but they go to classical concerts. It's something that you would not imagine in the United States. So, it's very interesting. It's very, so it kind of added. So for a while, I was going back and forward. I was gonna have a place in New York, and I had a place there. And that radio show was for Americans. And I was supposed to present, the European culture for Americans in English. My German is not good enough for a radio show. But through the radio show, you also I met harpists and I met other people, and I realized how limited I am. I just know piano, So like just talking to a harpist, or ukuleles, like all different instruments, it just really was an eye-opening. And you learn from every human being, from their life story. You learn so much. And I think that was it became so interesting. It's fascinating to interview a person. And as much as you prepare, when you start talking, suddenly you hear all those little stories, and it's mind-blowing, and I have a lot of friends, made through those shows, and keep in touch, and, and exposed to a lot of repertoire, really. You stay in one place for a long time and you go through the notions, it's the same thing, it's the same thing, it's the same thing. And I think you need to find your way to reinvent yourself and excite yourself. So I think for me, that was going to Europe and exploring Europe. And when I'm there, it's so close, everything. So you hop on the plane and you go to one place one weekend and you explore another place for a different weekend, and there's so much music there in every church you go,
really.
Yeah, I mean, it's very different. So I find it to be, now I'm Americanized completely, and there's a lot of things I could not, but I think I have now the best of both worlds,
Sounds great.
So
tell us a little bit about your performance that we're about to play. Where did it take place, and the piece?
Yeah, it took place in New York, in La Posa Rouge. Yeah, downtown. And actually, I'm wearing black because I came from a funeral. Literally, a friend of mine, and it was kind of like form-fitting for that. It was presented, we did a lot of projects with David and Dubal. And it was what I actually organized the whole event. And so I came and I played. It's a Liszt.
And how long have you practiced this piece? Is it part of your regular repertoire?
No, because David has those tricks. He always calls a few weeks. He's like, I'm doing this. Can you learn this piece? It's always last moment, and it's always like a new piece. But it's been great because he always throws something that I would have never thought of. So it's a Miserere by Liszt. It's a transcription.
Thank you very much, Aviva. It was wonderful. Thank you for participating. Yes, I wanted to move on to Korine Fujiwara, who also was my peer at Juilliard in the early 90s. And I am just amazed at her career path. She's a multi-talented musician and a composer and a performer and a teacher. So let's start with, you founded a quartet Carpe Diem, that means seize the day. Tell us a little bit about your story, maybe a little bit before Juilliard, after Juilliard, until the moment that you founded your quartet.
Okay, it's a curvy story. We were talking before we started recording this video about our situations, which brought us to Juilliard, into this big melting pot of creativity. I was born in the state of Montana, which is the fourth largest state in the United States, but it has fewer than 1 million people in the entire state. So that means, it was all mostly rural, mostly open, uninhabited. I lived in the big city of Billings. It was 100,000 people. That's all. I was in a bubble, and it was a nice, comfortable bubble. And I couldn't wait to get out of that bubble. We always see beyond when we're young, and then we forget what is good. We take everything for granted. So as soon as I could, I went to school in Chicago at Northwestern, which was also a beautiful bubble. When I went to New York, we were all so young and so incredibly clueless about life in general. And in New York, when I first went for my audition, I was watching someone on the street who was walking around with a box on their head, and I thought, I want to live here. I've never seen anything like that. And that was my very naive mindset. At Juilliard, it was, again, I was clueless. I feel like if I could go back in time and say, pay attention, this is something you're going to use a lot. You should have paid attention, but I'm telling you now. That my training at Juilliard was really, I really appreciated what I learned, and I didn't know what I would be using, which was all of it, including the stuff outside of the school. Especially what was really fun is that I had a group of musician friends that we were trying to make money outside of school. And so we had a little collective, and I'd have these brides call me and say, I'd really love to walk down the aisle to Beethoven 9. Can you do that with a flute trio? Because I can't afford a string quartet or orchestra. And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I'll arrange it. At all this time, I had been composing, even back when I was like 9 years old, but I never told anybody, because I thought, wow, if I'm not studying composition, I'm not really allowed to be a composer. I can't really call myself that, but I'm going to just keep arranging. And so I was arranging music for everything, like string quartet version of Beethoven 9, piano trio version of Beethoven 9, the Rite of Spring opening ceremony. That was a strange bride, by the way, who wanted the Rite of Spring. I said to her, do you realize what this piece is about? That marriage, by the way, did not make it. But so I was at Juilliard with a degree in violin performance. And when I was in New York, I met the man who was going to become my husband. And we decided that we were going to leave New York. Whoever got the job first, we were going to leave New York. So we were sending resumes, and I was taking auditions. And he got a job in Ohio. I followed him, and I played violin in the Columbus Symphony Orchestra for 18 years. And when I joined the orchestra, 2 years later, they had a concertmaster search. The concertmaster came. He was a chamber music nut. I am a chamber music nut. From all my, I've always loved chamber music. We immediately found each other. And from that beginning, 1994, is when Carpe Diem started to create. And we played some concerts together. We invited a lot of other people around. We continued playing chamber music. In 2004, we decided, no, we should have this formation. We should play Chaz Weatherby was my first violinist. And all this time I'd been playing violin in the orchestra, and both of us mixed voices. We both played viola also. But I decided that I really actually prefer the role of viola for chamber music. And so I was the violist. And we found some colleagues, and we named our group.
Carpe Diem defies easy classification with programming that includes classical, gypsy, tango, folk, pop, rock, and jazz inspired music. That's some broad, repertoire that you guys. And I also love how it describes in your resume that Carpe Diem has become one of America's premier indie string quartets. Tell me a little bit more about your repertoire and that classification.
Well, so when we started playing together, and we had some very traditional programs, but we were all very good friends, living to in a close proximity, and we decided, why do we only play music written by dead white males in Europe? You know? Sorry. So, and we thought, we don't eat one kind of food. We have many different culinary tastes and some preferences, but we're very curious about exploring that. When we listen to music, we listen to everything across the board. I would put on Balkan beatbox and the Gypsy Kings and some Nirvana. And we thought, well, why are we so narrow-minded when we're performing? And so we started exploring. Really found it much more gratifying to be very diverse in our repertoire choices, and also found that it cross-pollinated our classical music choices. It expanded our musical color palette, being able to circle around with all of these different musicians, and even so much so that we did a live show with a folk rock guitarist in Milwaukee. He came down, and we had spent a while. We arranged about 12 of his songs, and he played with us the first through, and he said he left the room, he said, and I went and I cried, because it was so strange and beautiful to hear my music expanded out from just me and my guitar.
So Strings Magazine says that Korine Fujiwara is 25 contemporary composers to watch. So she's one of the 25. Congratulations to you. So as you've been composing, you said your whole life secretly, when did you really feel, at which point did you feel, I want to include composing as official part of my career, my path? Tell us more about that.
That probably would have been right about the time when this piece that I had joked about writing got programmed. And so then I had to write it with a deadline, and it was very well received, and it turned out to be one of the more popular pieces that we can play in the quartet. And then I had written just a single movement without the intention of it being much more. Then a year later, my colleague said, well, you better finish it. And I was, what do you mean finish it? And he says, well, this should be an evening length work. This should be like a half of a program. And okay. The world premiere of Fiddle Suite Montana, which was what it was called. And so I had to write it. And so then I quickly wrote it. And then I realized, actually, this is how some people make their living. They write music. They don't try to do all these other things. And so I guess about that time, I started to feel like, yeah, I can do this. I can write music. And people seem to like it. And that's okay. And if they like it enough to ask me to write another one, who's going to argue with that?
I watched a little bit of your opera. It's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about that opera.
It was commissioned by the Opera Columbus and Pro Musica Chamber Orchestra, and it was loosely based on the events that followed the great 1913 flood, which it killed many people, destroyed houses, and what it did do, it was a catalyst. It brought many neighborhoods together, many poor, cross immigrants, former slaves, and very rich people. And so it talks about that as a community catalyst. Also, it's about trauma and about how trauma, it continues through generations if it's left unchecked. And I found that to be true watching it in people in my family who have experienced trauma. It's important to address the issue of trauma and try to get through it, because it does cycle through family generations. That energy exists, and it introduces itself, no matter how hard you try, into the next generation. And so it's more about trauma and family using 1913 flood, and the city of Columbus as the stage. Camille Claudel was a woman sculptress who is tied forever in history with Augustine Rodin. She, of course, being a woman and a sculptress, was living sort of in the wrong time period for her talent to be fully recognized and embraced by a very much male-dominated world of sculptors. Augustine Rodin came into a studio where she was with like-minded women who were all sculptors, and he was first an instructor figure for them. She became his muse and he became her muse. Together they started influencing each other. Her mother and her sister and her brother rejected her as an artist and as a female because Rodin had a long-standing relationship with another woman. And so that relationship ended badly, and she also became pregnant, and the pregnancy was ended, and perhaps she was suffering a little postpartum depression. We don't know, but she was eventually institutionalized. And then the doctor said she could be released. Her family said, no, keep her there. So she died in the institution. That story needed to be told. I was asked to write a ballet first. It was a big multimedia production with dancers, of course, and a poet, original poetry, photography, digital manipulation of the pictures, and the sculptures of Camille Claudel. And that ballet was 82 minutes long. So from this, we're hearing some selections of the string quartet version that has been condensed for concert version.
Bravo, Karine. Thank you so much. We enjoyed greatly your participation. And our last artist during this workshop is Anton Batagov, who is an old friend of mine from Moscow, who is started as a classically trained pianist. He was a prize winner at the Tchaikovsky competition in 1986. And then he was introduced to the music of John Cage and Morton Feldman, etc. And his career took a turn of events. So Anton, why don't you start here? I also would love for you to mention your performance of Messiaen and also Bach Art of Fugue. That is incredibly significant. Tell us your story, please. Thank you.
Oh, well, you know, I think my story is kind of really strange because I was a classically trained musician and I studied at, you know, one of our two best musical schools, which is the Gnesian School, and and then Moscow Conservatory. But at a very early age, I realized that something was wrong in the classical music world, not in the music itself, but in the way it is performed and in the way it is presented. Because, you know, how is it possible to be a musician, a performer, and not to be a composer? Because it's been like this for centuries. You know, if we look at 16th, 17th, 18th century musicians, it was normal for a performer to compose, to improvise, and, you know, and the same was necessary for a composer to be a performer. So in the 20th century, we still have fantastic examples like Rachmaninoff. He played his works and he conducted and he played some classical repertoire too, but he played classical music written in 19th century exactly the same way as he played his own compositions. So for him, there was no border between his music and someone else's music. So, and that was a kind of model for me to be a, you know, performer slash composer or composer slash performer. Of course, I had to know the history of classical music, but I had another, let's call it, you know, parallel or alternative history of music. I really loved, you know, I listened to all rock music from the very beginning and up to the latest releases when I studied at school in the conservatory, and this was much more attractive for me, frankly speaking, than classical music. And then in my own performances and composition, when I started to compose, I attempted to combine these two worlds: classical music and whatever else. You know, sometimes I live in the US and sometimes I live in Russia. And for me, it's very interesting to oscillate between these two poles, Russia and America. And, you know, these two worlds, they are very different, but they have so many things in common. And in America, when I first came to New York, it was 28 years ago in 1992. I met John Cage. Actually, I was the last Russian musician to speak to John Cage just 2 days before his death. And I met Philip Glass, and I met the composers from Ben Gonna Ken, like Julia Wolf and Michael Gordon and David Lang. Now they are like living classics. So it was early 90s. And it was so important for me to feel that I am not only a part of that, you know, Russian or post-Soviet music world behind the Iron Curtain, but I'm also the part of this minimalist or, you know, post-minimalist contemporary music world in America. And so since then, I've been like the ambassador of Russian music in America and the ambassador of American music in Russia. So with Philip Glass, he calls me a friend of him, but, you know, he's like 83 now. I'm 54, but still, you know, he's very young, by the way, much younger than me, I think. So, he wrote some music for me, and I performed it, and I recorded it, and I made a number of piano transcriptions of his music from operas and films, and you know, we play together, and it's a fantastic experience, you know, to just to play together and to be together with such a great master. And I play my own works, and I play music written in 16th century, like Purcell, well, Purcell is 17th, early English music, and Johann Pachelbel and Bach and many other types of music written in, you know, different times. But for me, there is no, you know, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes I call music written centuries ago minimalism, simply because I'm a minimalist as a composer. And when I hear something, you know, similar to modern minimalism, exactly the same structures in music written a long time ago, I'm so happy to present it together with modern music. So it's like late 80s. It's amazing that I was like 23, 24, but I was already in the middle of all this contemporary music life in Russia, and I was the artistic director of the annual Contemporary Music Festival in Moscow, with such musicians like Kronos Quartet coming to Moscow, and you know, it was unbelievable. At that time, Philip Glass was a musician who was already living classic, but it was absolutely impossible to get the sheet music of his composition, because he played with his ensemble, and all his scores, it was not, you know, intended to be, you know, published. But I had a friend, she was and is a brilliant musicologist, and she had a friend in Philip Glass ensemble, and she asked him, can you please make a copy of the score of Einstein on the Beach and send it to me? And he made a copy and sent it to her. And that's how I got the music, because, you know, not only in Russia, but even in the US 30 years ago, it was not possible at all to find his scores. So that's how I got it. And, you know, it was very strange for me that, you know, such a great masterpieces, not only, I mean, Philip Glass, but in music history, were not written for piano. And my you know, favorite compositions were written for anything but not the piano. And I thought that that's a kind of wrong. So I must do something to, you know, play it with just my two hands. And that's what I did with Philip Glass, with, you know, some fragments from Einstein and Kayanis cuts. And actually, I recorded them a few years ago, and there is an album called Prophecies, released in the US, with my piano transcriptions of his works. And there is another album where I play his very famous music from The Hours, the movie. The Hours, of course, it's also a piano transcription. Well, actually, you know, this performance, I mean, this video, it's from my recital about 8 years ago. But the album was released just, you know, 3 weeks ago or something like this, because I had several pieces. And then 2 years ago, I just realized that there were 6 pieces, and it's a kind of a album or piano cycle, let's call it this way. And I edited them a little bit and recorded, and so now it's out, and it's great that no matter where you live and where you recorded it, where you released it, you know, it was released three weeks ago, and now about like 100,000 people already listened to it. So it's nice to have this technology.
Thank you so much, Anton.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much to Aviva and Korine. And I wanted to mention that these two ladies serve on the honorary board at Anselmo Academy of Music and the Arts. The honorary board consists of leading musicians in today world of musicians, and they provide moral support to music education and the programs that we provide in New York City. So thank you so much. Thank you all for joining me today. Stay tuned as we create a next workshop, probably sometime in the next 30 days, with more leading musicians in today's world to inspire young generation. Thank you so much and have a wonderful evening. Bye-bye.